Okay, and we will move to our next presentation, which will be last in this small block. And the presentation is given by Anke Langner from Dresden, who will speak about a particular project, how to apply a completely different type of learning. Because as I said at the beginning, it's complicated because if you are about to apply digital learning, you usually need to really redesign many processes in your learning and create something new, which is hard for students, which may be hard for teachers, etc. And it is nice to see some pilot projects, some case studies, how to do this, how to do a specific new project. So I would like to give word to Anke Langner with her presentation. So please proceed.
Die Universitätsschule Dresden ist ein öffentlicher Schulversuch der Stadt Dresden. Er wird zusammen mit WissenschaftlerInnen der TU Dresden umgesetzt. In der Schule lernen SchülerInnen der Grund- und Oberschule gemeinsam bis zum 10. Jahrgang. Der Aufwuchs soll bis in die gymnasiale Stufe erfolgen. Die gestaltende Bildungsforschung entwickelt in einem Co-Konstruktionsprozess gemeinsam mit den LernbegleiterInnen der Schule datenbasiert Lehr-Lernformate. Zeitgleich werden Lehramtsstudierende der TU Dresden aktiv in den Prozess mit eingebunden. Der Schulversuch ist auf 15 Jahre angelegt. Hier wird Lernen ausgehend von der individuellen Entwicklung jedes Kindes gestaltet. Der Lernprozess geht von Neugier und Kreativität der SchülerInnen aus. Daraus entstehen fächerübergreifende Projekte. In der Projektgruppe bewältigen die SchülerInnen in Kooperation miteinander gemeinsame und individuelle Aufgaben mit dem Ziel, die Forscherfrage zu beantworten. Begleitet werden die SchülerInnen von LernbegleiterInnen, vom Raum als dritten Pädagogen und von einer Lern- und Schulmanagement-Software, die eigens dafür entwickelt wird. Die SchülerInnen sind aktiver Teil ihres ganztägigen Lernprozesses und lernen ihn zu steuern und mitzubestimmen. In der Universitätsschule Dresden lernen alle SchülerInnen zusammen, unabhängig von Sprache, Lernausgangslage oder ihrem Alter. Die Universitätsschule Dresden stellt ein Reallabor dar, verbunden mit der Aufgabe, theoriebasiert die Schule der Zukunft zu gestalten. Dieser Transformationsprozess erfordert eine sehr enge Absprache zwischen wissenschaftlicher Leitung und allen Akteuren der Schulgemeinschaft. Gemeinsam werden schulorganisatorische Maßnahmen getroffen, wie auch Professionalisierungsangebote initiiert. Es werden gemeinsam Werkzeuge für PädagogInnen entwickelt und die Software angepasst. Die Elternarbeit wird unter anderem mit dem eigens dafür geschaffenen Format Elternakademie gemeinsam gestaltet. Im Schulversuch wird so die Schule der Zukunft als Schule für alle erprobt und erforscht.
In this presentation, I would like to present to you what I view to be the central elements of the future of learning based on the model of the University School Dresden pilot project. Using our expectations of future learning as the reference point, I will then present you with our expectations of teaching and learning formats of the School of the Future, always from a digital perspective, using project work and learning pathways. I will conclude by summing up with computer-assisted teaching and learning formats at the University School. Drawing on cultural historical theory which took root in the Soviet Union 100 years ago, I will outline our expectations for the future of learning. Humankind is a biological, psychological, social unit. Cultural historical theory specifies that the social and the biological go hand in hand and are inseparable. Human development is defined by dialogue. Without interpersonal interaction, we would fail to develop. Remarkably, Vygotsky identified this principle for gestures. An infant carries out a movement and their audience, mom or dad, interprets this movement. One gesture stands for another. Mom and dad react to this movement. They give the child a ball that is nearby and give this object a name. Through this activity, the child reacts and learns something new. They recognize the object and understand its designated name, a ball. By interacting with others, the child acquires knowledge of the world. Every change in higher mental functions is founded on intrapsychic processes between two people. As a consequence, any form of isolation impedes the development process and therefore makes learning impossible. The brain is a biosocial organ which is conditioned by emotions. Or to put it in another way, emotions open and close the mind. Emotions also aid individuals in making sense of their acquired knowledge. Interaction conveys meaning. A person can only make sense of this individually. An individual can designate meaning to something if they can tie it to prior knowledge, interests and needs, as well as to positive emotional connotations. At the same time, whatever the individual learns must lie within the zone of proximal development, so that they are not under-challenged or over-challenged. The zone of proximal development is anything that a learner can do only with the help and guidance of someone else. Working with others is the crucial point here. It does not always have to be a parent or a teacher who teaches the child something new. It could also be their peer who has already acquired knowledge in an area that the individual in question does not yet have. According to Galperin and Vygotsky, it is important to support the logic of the knowledge acquisition process if it is to work. Internalization of material action and each of the total 6 stages must all be part of the learning process. You see, it is quite a challenge to create a schooling process which corresponds more closely to natural human learning. In the University School pilot project, our aspiration is to implement cultural historical theory in a school's learning environment to a greater extent than before. This means students learn collaboratively and pursuant to their individual paths of development. Every student learns through connection to the real world and the world of work. From an early stage, students experience and learn how to work in a team with different age groups and group combinations. The learning process develops from an externally controlled process to more independent learning. Teachers support students pedagogically throughout this process. Learning is computer-assisted for all students, accessible to all and therefore inclusive. Finally, learning is exploratory and discovery-oriented. The focus is not on reproducing knowledge, but rather on learning something new as well as preserving and encouraging the creativity of the students. From grade 7 and up, we follow a distinctive form of project work, as you can see here. There are 5 phases of varying lengths within a project work cycle. The goals and objectives of these phases are set for the students. The initiation phase focuses on prior knowledge and finding initial ideas related to a project theme before the students define the topic via research in the next phase. By the end of this phase, they need to formulate research questions and come up with a suggestion for which methods and subject areas they can use to answer the research question. Students work individually up to this point. During a first interim presentation of the project idea, which has been defined by now, the students form a small project team. During a first interim presentation of the project idea, which has been defined by now, the students form small project teams in which they plan their projects in greater detail together while maintaining their individual focus. Planning is the basis of the projects, which always correlates with acquiring knowledge in at least 3 subjects. The project ends with a presentation of the results, which always includes giving feedback to each other, and reflecting on work as a team and what the individual learned. Not all students can manage these 5 phases of the project work. Instead, the students have to grow into project work. The key principle of project work is the same for all grades. The idea is to develop a project based on their own questions about the world, and yet the project is carried out quite differently in each grade. Grades 1 to 3 have a focus on project-oriented work, where all students of a core group work together, guided by their core group leader, a teacher. After this, they can ask questions for themselves, which they can then answer from whichever perspective they choose. Each week, they explore perspectives so that after 6 weeks of the project, they have gone through at least 5 perspectives. They experience learning environments prepared by a teacher with concentrations in math, German, crafts, music and art, to name a few. For these grades, how the project is structured is very much in the hands of the teacher, and the students are not asked to work in collaboration with others, because at this egocentric stage of development, only a few students are capable of it. In grades 4 to 6, the structure of the project work phases requires the students to have a more self-regulated working style. Here, project learning is divided into 2 phases: the associating phase and the initial research phase. The students must define their research questions, select their method for answering the question, and also select the subject they want to use to develop an answer, like math, German, history, biology, etc. Based on their questions, the students then form small teams and work on the project together up until the presentation. Grasping the knowledge is crucial, which is why there is a focus on application and school practice days. Students in grades 7 to 8 work much more autonomously with some guidance. The project work takes on a serious character by means of application to real work situations, such as in business or agriculture. This is important for students at this age for the development of their identity. The project work at this stage is the same as what I showed you on the previous slide. As the students become older and gain more experience with project work, they are beginning to work increasingly independently, and the projects themselves become more abstract. By grades 11 and 12, they take the form of small research projects. The way we design project work at the school encourages the students to learn how to set goals for themselves by defining the project goals for themselves. They learn to develop a workflow by planning and structuring a project and working according to this plan. This enables them to acquire time management skills. They must independently conceptually frame their project by selecting perspectives. They learn how to prepare their results and how to critically reflect on and present them. Reflection is a key determining factor in self-directed learning, along with metacognitive processes. This is accompanied by self-assessment and self-efficacy on the part of the students. Project work builds up a student's metacognitive competencies, helps them to apply their own knowledge and newly acquired knowledge, and, crucially, also helps them to develop their social skills. Students must display a command of process and group dynamics. They must also practice communication and cooperation in their project groups. The aim is to support the structure of project work. Digital tools can be a great help for this. This slide shows a student's dashboard view. The milestones define the project structure. These are either set by the teacher or the student, depending on the age of the student. Each milestone is associated with a task type, which you can also see at the bottom of the slide, accompanied by a timeline. Within a project group, it's easy for the students to communicate and share resources. This is important so that everyone can really do their part in making the project a success. Computer-assisted project management is important as it allows the students to determine their resources for the project electronically. This data is subsequently incorporated into the lesson planning. I will talk about this in more detail at the end of the presentation. Self-guided learning in terms of setting goals, evaluating goals, and reflecting on the process requires a tool for learning pathways. Learning pathways have various functions and are closely linked to the didactic methods of the project work. They serve as a method of documenting the learning process of each student and enable the students to understand the learning process. Learning pathways support the learning process both for the student and the teacher. Learning pathways are also intended to enable the student to develop self-efficacy and provide them and the teacher with a basis for reflection on the learning process. If needed, the learning pathways offer a basis for feedback or grading. There are learning pathways for every subject, facilitating all possible courses of education. Learning pathways are defined according to the age of the student, and the core curriculum is represented in all of them. They are not necessarily linear. The learning pathways follow a principle of acquisition that does not necessarily need to be carried out by the student. These learning pathways consequently represent the idea of following both subject-based logic and the individual's logic, thus confronting a challenge that we want to explore further. In contrast to numeric grades, the individual learning pathway can always change. This includes previously completed elements of knowledge. Students can view their learning paths on a daily basis, and they provide the basis for automated development reports once a semester. On this slide, you can see how a learning pathway looks to a student. Under the competencies menu point, the students can see what they have been working on already and how close they are to completion, shown as a percentage point. This slide shows an excerpt from the mathematics pathway, which is split into the skills of addition and subtraction. Currently, the student is viewing the pathway as a list. Work is still underway to implement a tree structure that can be branched out more and more. I have briefly outlined two pedagogical tools for you: project work as a didactic tool and learning pathways as a pedagogical supporting element. As you can see, both of these tools are computer assisted. Learning paths are fully computerized. Project work progresses from analog to digital. The question of when students start to work more with digital tools for completing their project work is determined by their age and their development. Only once the students can plan their projects in the analog lab book and then carry them out, will they then switch over to the digital dashboard. Computers assist the whole organization. The goal is that the school organizes itself around the developmental needs of each individual student. To accomplish this, we need a great deal of data about the students' learning and development. Ideally, everyone involved in the learning process will generate this data. This data does not need to be produced in addition to the normal day-to-day workings of the school. It is already a part of the planning process. This is the basic idea of the learning and school management software at University School Dresden. Or rather, we plan to develop software to this end. The basic framework for the learning paths is stored in the software and documented for each student by their teacher. It indicates the achieved percentage, 0 to 25 to 50 to 75 or 100%. It describes which material and which form of learning assessment were used for the learning pathway and can be supplemented with further comments from the teacher. The documentation in the learning paths provides the basis for development reports for each student, which they can receive every 6 months. These are generated automatically and can provide a basis to create report cards. We not only document the learning process, but we also document the curriculum content and manage the timetable here. As a public school, the University School Dresden is obliged to document both of these. When students are working on a learning module, material relating to different subjects, they log in and create their own digital timetable. Students actively help update their timetables, including marking their records of school and learning studio attendance and absence. The students sign in and out by scanning their chip, which is then logged into the system. This documentation simplifies the basic record keeping for school administration. Procedures for obtaining parental consent have also been greatly simplified. This is done digitally via a consent management system. Communication is fast and prompt, with everything organized within the computer program. Currently, the program does not offer a separation of roles between parents and students, which is problematic for us. This is not only necessary for younger students. A school must also be a safe space for children, one where they are separated from their parents, and this must be reflected in the software. As I mentioned previously, learning pathways are allocated with learning material. Thus, the system also encompasses a content management system. The student's e-portfolio therefore gains a structure similar to learning resources through the learning pathways. The structure is currently under construction. The previous system of an infinite list is contradictory to the goal of more independent learning as opposed to externally regulated learning. Students need clear structures, not least in their learning materials. Learning management as a part of the University School Dresden pilot project and the use of software also applies to the general structure of the projects via computer-assisted project management, as you have seen earlier in this presentation. This standardization of processes makes the goal of individualization for each student possible in the first place. Moreover, it is also very useful for facilitating substitute teaching plans, which is necessary for a school without set holiday breaks, where students instead book vacation time. Computer-assisted project management also goes hand in hand with resource management. In grades 7 and up, the students plan their projects increasingly independently, setting their own schedules and determining the resources they need, which they note in the software. With this data, the school is able to automatically plan its timetable according to the needs of its students, taking into account the school's personnel and room resources. There is currently a joint project underway between industrial management at the Faculty of Business and Economics of TU Dresden and the Faculty of Education for the development of an automatic timetabling system of this type. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to know more about the research project, please contact me. For more on the school, please contact the school's principal, Maxi Hess. As you can see here, there are also more resources available online.
Thank you, Anke. Thank you for your presentation. And I am having with me in the studio Mr. Roman Vejražka, who is eligible to answer any questions you had. And I have the first question because I actually like this learning pathways, and that was really great. Mm-hmm. When the students can comment on the pathways and somehow they can manage what is going on, there could be a feedback, right? I mean, the tutors can get the feedback, mm-hmm. even students can get a feedback. Is it possible to make a series of feedbacks in sense that I put the feedback, like a tutor, to the student, mm-hmm. then student do something, mm-hmm. and I will make a feedback of his reaction to the feedback?
Yeah, like a chat. Yeah. So it's exactly working like that. Yeah, and so it's natural because, as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the learning process is like an interview and or dialogue of two persons, and that's now fully digitally supported. And the chat, it's a great way to do it. What's very important. due to software restriction, it's kept private. That means that the teacher having 30 students, having 30 separate chats, and development of each student can be treated separately.
Yeah, okay. And a natural question, because there has to be a really huge amount of data, right? I mean, it's a many pathways and projects and tutors. I mean, if there is a tutor who are managing a small group, and there is about to be a change of the tutor, okay, then you will come and the old one, I don't know, you know, probably travel to another country and work in different job. So is it easy for a new tutor to get in?
Yeah, actually, it's done so that the changing of the teacher or the teaching leader, it's possible by the system, but for them it's something common. They know that from the different groups, and the interface look the same. So they, if they only switching between the groups, it's pretty easy for them to manage it. And we support just easy switching from one chat to another, so they can do it directly from their computer, from their account. They do not need to re-log in to another account. It's and we just been thinking that those actions can happen, and so we design it in that way.
Okay, that's very nice.
Yep.
I mean, I heard, or we heard in the presentation, that it is actually a research project.
Yep.
So I guess that it has to be evaluated at the end. Are you aware of what would happen at the end?
Actually, it's a long-term project, has been said in the presentation, and the evaluation will come. And because it's handled by scientists on the backstage, so they are just evaluating not only the process of every kid, but all the really important, let's say, big data which are the behind, and the analysis will come after a few years, and it's a long-term project. What has to be said, the project of Unischule, it's quite successful, because each year they are getting the fully booking for the next year, and there is really a request for the new way of teaching in Germany.
Yeah, that's again great. And I mean, we've heard some comments on that, but I have some question as for Artem. Is this system somehow help tutors to warn that some student is getting into problem, or maybe is excellent? You know, it's the other way.
Actually, the teachers have a full view of the students' development, and it's their let's say job and their skills to recognize which student is going in which situation. And we have to say the software cannot do everything. So we have to fully rely on the teachers, and we really try to serve them all the necessary information that they need for their decisions. But decision, it's on the end on the teachers.
Yeah. So I guess this student portfolio, as we heard, is quite important, because you can see everything. Okay, and maybe to be more concrete, to know specific scenario, there was this moment when students are deciding about the research questions, and I was curious about what would happen when students are somehow lost don't know what to do. So how the next process look like? I mean, do tutor weigh in, or?
Yeah, the tutor help him with this process, and there are a lot of stages of the project when the student just submit the project, and the tutor make a comments, and then there is a resubmitting, and there are I guess 7 or 8 stages of the project, and they try to help the students with the self-development and with the self-learning.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you. We can actually talk about that, because this is quite connected of what we do at the university as well. So, but thank you very much for your answers. Thank you, Anke, for a great presentation. And since we have a limited time, we have to move on. Thank you.